All right, guys, so we've got our 4 legs. They've been glued together, and we've cut them down to 2 1/4 by 2 1/4. And one thing you're going to want to double check before you taper your legs is when you've cut these at 2 1/4, you've cut this side, you've cut the edge grain, but you haven't cut the face grain. So theoretically, 3/4 plus 3/4 plus 3/4 equals 2 1/4. That's how it's designed. But there could be some swelling in the wood. The manufacturer might have made the wood slightly different, and so we want to double check that. So not only do you want to cut it on the edge grain, boom, right there at 2 1/4 as you pass it through, then also you want to just check and go ahead and flip it onto its face right here so that you can cut right at 2 1/4 on that side as well. Just make sure that it's completely square at 2 1/4 by 2 1/4. That's what we want to see. Okay? Once that's done, you've got them marked A, B, C, and D. You've drawn your circle. You're going to use this thing right here, this contraption called a taper jig. That taper jig is what's going to give us that nice effect of our leg getting narrower as it goes down toward the ground. This taper jig has a guide rail on the bottom of it, and it slides into our miter slot right here, or our miter gauge slot right here on the right side of the blade. So you get the fence out of your way, slide the fence out, make sure that you set the jig right in that slot, and it should be moving freely, nice and smooth through there, so that you don't have any issues with that. Then watch this carefully. You're going to take, every one of your legs has a little quarter circle on it. That quarter circle is going to start facing the blade. So I'm going to put that in my jig, and it's going to be facing the blade on the corner that's closest to that blade. When I turn the blade on and push it through, it's going to taper this side of the board, and then all I have to do is simply roll the board over like that, taper that next side as well. I'm only tapering 2 sides of this board. So with it there and in place and nothing in between the fence, I'm going to make the fence of the jig and the board. I'm going to make sure this toggle clamp comes down, and it's very important that this red handle be straight up and down. If you put it there, you think, oh, that's doing the trick. It's not. You got to push it all the way over. There's a little click, click. That's what I want to see. Handle straight up and down. That holds the board in place right where I want it, right against the fence. I'm going to go ahead and do it with the back side as well. Both of them straight up and down. At this point, I'm still going to use my push stick on this jig, and it's going to go right here. I want to be careful of my left hand. I'm going to follow all the normal rules of a table saw, except for the fact that my board is actually on the table. Make sure that this board is not touching that blade when you start up the saw. So I've pulled it back a few inches, so I'm nowhere close to touching the blade with the saw. I'm going to go ahead and make this cut using my push stick on the jig itself. I make sure I push all the way through the blade, and then I just stop and wait. Do not remove that piece of wood until the blade has come to a complete stop and the green light has stopped blinking. I remove it from the back. I go give that to my next period teacher for a doorstop. But before I do, I'm going to want to use this piece on this back side. So I loosen the clamps, and then I simply roll, like we talked about already. I roll this piece so that now my quarter circle is still close to the blade, but it's now on the top. So first it was on the bottom, second it's on the top. I'm going to use this little shim here on my back clamp. So I'm going to slide it in here kind of where it was, and I could even push it a little bit further than it was just to get a nice hold down on my board. So I basically replace it. It's now shorter, obviously, because I've taken 1/8 of an inch out with that last cut. But now I'm ready to go. I double check my board, give it a little tug, make sure it's firm in there, get my push stick ready. Again, I'm away from the blade. Now what we're always worried about with the table saw is the piece of wood that's between the blade and the fence firing back at us. That's what officially kickback is. In a situation like this, we do have these off-cut pieces that can touch the blade, and then they come flying back. These are not going to hurt you. Don't be afraid, but be aware that they may come skipping back off the table. There's no force or power behind them because they're not wedged between a fence and a blade. But pay attention. Don't be too jumpy. If it comes back, it's just going to come back and tap you in the thigh. Then you can throw that thing away. Pull it back here, and then we've got the first of our tapered legs. You'll notice that the sides that the quarter circle go through, they're the ones that have the taper. My taper matches up nicely. It hit both sides. I come down to my taper down at the bottom. I do that with all 4 legs, and I move on to the next step.